I think humans ultimately will seek out authenticity. And I mean, like, if you go on social media, you see this well. Yeah, I mean, my brain immediately switches off. I think it's the same for music.
Welcome to AI Music Unmuted. Real Talk by RealMusic.ai. The show that talks to experts and thought leaders about tools and truths for musicians in the age of technology and creativity.
Today's guest, David Ronan, musician and founder and CEO of RoEx. Hi, David. Welcome to the Real Music Podcast. How are you today?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you on. I'm excited to chat with you. I think you have a good background in both tech and in music. So tell me a little bit musically, what kind of music were you into? How did you get interested in music? Where does music fit in your life?
Yeah, I guess like I've been making music since I'm about 15. All very much kind of like experimental kind of electronic stuff, techno, jungle, IDM. Big fan of anything from Warp Records, things like Apex, Twin Boards of Canada. That's the kind of stuff I make. I have an extensive collection of synthesizers, but don't have time to play them, unfortunately. Um, just bought one there last week, and I barely have that time to pick it up, which is a shame. But yeah, I haven't put out music in a while, but just because of having two kids, and that's just the way it is, I'm afraid. But like back in the day, I used to play in bands, and yeah, used to up to all sorts of things. Where I'm from, which is Limerick City in Ireland.
It's interesting to see that. I have two kids as well. My daughter's older. She's actually going off to college. But, I have a small studio. I have guitars, keyboards, MIDI controllers, drums, all sitting around. And I always find myself playing them a lot less than I'd like to. But for
Yeah,
me, music is one of those hobbies. I just tell myself I'll never give up. I know some really talented people who have a dusty drum set in the basement or something like that. So it's always good to keep that passion going, even
yeah,
if you don't have a lot of time to do it. So it's interesting. I hear people even talking about how AI has helped them get back into playing music again. I mean, there's some efficiencies in it, and that's, not always a good thing, but when you maybe have small kids, you don't have the opportunity to have people over to play with or even the time to create. Do you see AI maybe once your kids are a little older, perhaps out of diapers, that you can, find a little more time?
absolutely. I think so. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm just itching to get back at it. But it's definitely easier than ever now, for sure. I mean, like I know a lot of people who use things like Suno to generate ideas and then kind of work off that. I mean, obviously there's the ethical considerations with Suno, we won't go into that, but like it has become, it's so much easier now, especially like there's lots of devices for, generating accompaniments. I know Moises do, have that their particular thing product in Moises Studio. Basically you can play something and they'll kind of generate an accompaniment for you. So if you're, as you said, stuck for someone to play with, there's technology out there to allow you to kind of at least jam something out on your own. And then, once you obviously meet up with that person, you can get this, but what's what the AI has done essentially. So you're never stuck.
I think I remember my when I was younger, my first Casio keyboard before I had a real one. It had all sorts of buttons you could just push, and all of a sudden it would play a samba, then it would play
Yeah.
merengue, then it would play. And I don't know if any of my friends were really playing samba and merengue, but it gave you something to jam out to. I think we're seeing in an interesting way, much more advanced use of technology to help people collaborate. And, I guess that gets us a little bit into the assistive versus fully generative. And there's even a few arguments for fully generated AI music and, whether it be just some quick on theme background music for a YouTube video that, geez, you're certainly not
Yeah.
going to hire any musicians or take the time to record. And sometimes those are little parodies or funny songs. But just kind of jamming out, we had a guest on who has a product called Drumbot AI. And
Okay.
he's a guitarist and he just found programming to be very left brain. And he
Yeah.
also got sick of using loops. So he created AI drums and it was much more satisfying for him. So what are your thoughts on fully generative versus some of the assistive AI? And I'm sure that'll lead us into really your space.
Yeah. I mean, like I have friends who love the auto drummer. I can't remember the name of the thing. It's in Logic, basically. who say they're not drummers themselves, and for the exact reason that they're just stuck and they want to get generating something now. Like, I don't know if that's built on AI or anything, but like, even if it isn't, I mean, those types of tools have been around for a while. Like, I remember having a guitar pedal, like you said, that like I was able to play guitar along with, and it just generate drum patterns for you to jam along with. So like that has been something we've been using for a long, long time. You know what I mean? I think it's just probably now with a lot of the generative AI stuff, maybe it's the loops or whatever the patterns they're generating are probably a bit more, I don't know, looser or creative or more kind of unique, I suppose, instead of what let's just record it and that's it, I suppose. Yeah, I think that's quite interesting.
So you as a musician eventually kind of got into the music tech space. I always tell the story of how I have a music business degree, and people went back then and say, you can get a degree in music business. And nowadays, music tech is probably the degree that people say, okay, I actually get it now, that there's some really important degrees outside of just, performance. But how did you get into the tech space?
Yeah, good question. So I actually ended up, when I finished my undergraduate, which was in math and computing,
there's the answer
I
right
just,
there.
no, it's not. I was just,
Okay, go ahead.
So I was making so much music while I was doing my undergrad. I was like, you know what, I want to study this formally. So I went and I did a master's in music technology, which was like kind of balanced between electroacoustic composition and then all the rest of like learning things like Maxim SP and kind of obviously just programming kind of the things like C sound and things like that, which was awesome. And then at the end of it, I was basically so into kind of the DSP kind of synthesis side of things. I ended up doing my master's thesis on synthesizing a sitar string. Actually, I have a sitar behind me, and you can't really see it, but basically just fell in love with the sound of the sitar and figured out a way to synthesize it using physics. I was I mean, it was just like my parents couldn't get me out of the university when I was doing it. Like it was like 12-hour days. I just found my this is me kind of thing. Then I moved to London for just kind of broader opportunities and much better music scene, music life, all that kind of thing. And worked a few years and decided I want to go back to finish kind of where I started in terms of kind of academic side of things. I decided to pursue a PhD at the Centre for Digital Music in Queen Mary University, London, where I was doing it on intelligent audio production tools. I actually ended up, my PhD supervisor was one of the original founders of Langer, which I'm sure everyone knows is the first AI mastering service, and it's grown into other larger things now. And yeah, and I guess, and then during the middle, I had the opportunity to go work at Native Instruments in Berlin, which is one of those companies that we all grew up with, knowing all the synthesizers they make, and especially for making electronic music, which was a big deal. I worked there for a while, and I guess, yeah, then after that, I finished. I have an opportunity to go work for a company in London called AI Music. you could probably guess what they do. What they did, should I say. So yeah, I was the head of research there for 4.5 years. So I've always kind of been very much on the R&D kind of side of things. But basically what we were doing was we were taking phrases and loops that were generated by music producers that worked with us, and then bringing out ways to kind of stitch them together in different kind of ways. And so basically the idea was that you could, using software, you could go, okay, I need a house track that's 125 BPM in the key of A minor, and it needs to be 90 seconds, and I need the drop to be at 60. And the idea was that it just generated from phrase, and it would use, it wasn't like generative AI it is today. It was like using the AI to kind of stitch them together to make sure everything was harmonically worked together. All those, like, basically it made a cohesive sounding piece of music. The idea then was to license it for advertising, as you can imagine, because there's no licensing fees. And Apple really got excited about it and ended up buying the company. But I decided I didn't want to go work for a massive corporation. I really enjoyed the startup life, just basically building things and moving fast. And I knew that during my PhD, I had some intellectual property developed around mixing and mastering. So basically, I just spoke to university and decided that we were going to spin out and start a company, which is what I've been doing for the last 4 years now, which is RoEx, which is basically we have a platform for musicians that come along, give us their stems, provide some very basic mix settings, and we give them a mix and master track back in minutes instead of days at very low cost. Yeah, that's kind of my journey into music production as of today.
Just a quick side note, do you know Mansour, the founder of Beethoven?
Do I know? Yes, of course. Yeah, I know well.
Yeah. I think he's what, 7th generation sitar player, I believe.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
I know Mansour. We're both part, to his company, my company, we're part of the Amsterdam Dance Event startup community, basically. So that's why I know
Okay.
Mansour.
Yeah.
A
I mean, there's
lovely guy.
only so many sitar players in the music tech world, really.
Exactly.
Which if people want to say that there's not real musicians behind this, I mean, I think that's some proof right there.
Yeah.
Talk to me about the state of mixing and mastering in general and where AI fits into that.
If we're going to look at the kind of mixing and mastering, like we start with mastering. Yeah. So Isotope Ozone was kind of the first kind of major tool, I suppose, as a plugin in your DAW, and it's still very significant today and used a lot by a lot of people. But then Lander also burst onto the scene. And they kind of cracked the nut in terms of as a service where you can come along, upload your mix track, and then they would basically master it for you instead of you actually have to do anything. It was completely hands off. You might provide some very kind of basic guidance. And then that spun out a lot of different companies like eMaster came along, a few others. But I think that's been like a thing for about 15 years, I guess. And there's various other plugins that do that kind of thing. But in terms of mixing, there's been a few plugins over the years, like Sonable EQ, and I can't remember the Isotope plugin that does that. I think it's Nectar. I can't remember. They're very kind of assistive within the DAW, basically, to listen to your stems and make recommendations. But there's never been like a platform per se up until obviously yourselves came along and another one of our competitors, Automix, where you can basically provide your stems kind of very basic settings and it kind of gives it back to you. So it's kind of evolved over the years where it's become like very much you're in control to a certain degree where you can just hand it off and kind of get back the results essentially.
I find it interesting that a lot of people, even musicians and certainly younger creators and even producers nowadays. And when I say producer is kind of an interesting word, right? Where there's a lot of people with a lot of electronic music equipment and call themselves producers. And then there's, producers who, old generation who barely even know how to play instruments, right? Rick Rubin is one of those guys, I guess. But, a lot of people don't really understand the difference or where mastering fits into the equation and what the differences are between mixing and mastering. So Talk to us a little bit about that. And then has AI changed that?
Yeah, it is. It's funny. It's one of the problems we struggled with as a business, like people not knowing the difference because they just kind of lump it into one category and that's it. It's all the same, it's whatever. But they are very two distinct stages of the music production process. Obviously, the mixing is taking the individual kind of raw components of your recording. So like the bass, the drums, the vocals, all the individual instrument tracks, and essentially trying to blend them together cohesively. And the problem there is like you could be dealing with up to 20 or 30 tracks. Some of them might have problems where how they've been recorded, so that has to be taken care of. And then they need to be balanced, they need to be EQ'd, they compressed, the levels need to be set, they need to be spatialized. There's quite a few steps before you can kind of get it to something that's quite good. And then once you have that, you're happy with it. Then there's also the mastering stage. So the mastering stage is kind of like, I guess the way it's going to give an analogy, but like if you were to think about like cooking like a really fancy meal, mixing is like where the chef is selecting the ingredients and blending together to make like a really nice dish. But the mastering is kind of like the seasoning on the end. So in some ways, like if the dish is really, really good, it doesn't actually need a lot of seasoning. And that's kind of where the mastering sits. It's kind of like the final kind of check before it kind of goes out to the people in the restaurant, essentially. If that makes sense.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, I certainly have a pretty strong understanding of it. But, I find a lot of people don't fully understand the difference and where it fits in.
I mean, like, I think with mixing, it's part a corrective process and part a creative process. I mean, the corrective process is basically removing like noise, click, hum, if you've done live recordings, rolling off certain frequencies that are always going to be there that that need to be removed, getting kind of the initial balance right so that you can kind of make better decisions on what needs to be added and what can be removed. And I guess as well as part of the process is like doing the arrangement and things like that, which is obviously very much a creative aspect of mixing and making sure the vocal sits right at the certain parts of the song. I think like technology can take care of a lot of that stuff, which is a good thing because a lot of that is kind of just legwork. And then leave you kind of to focus on the more important stuff, as I kind of alluded to, like adding kind of creative audio effects, adding like saturation to the vocal at different stages, depending on kind of what kind of, emotion you're trying to evoke. I think if anyone has the money, they should pay for it. But like, if you don't have the means, I think by all means use tools that are there to kind of do it for you. If that's what's stopping you to releasing the video.
What do you feel like that a, say, young producer or just any type of creator or musician should really need to know, even with using AI tools? I repeat myself a lot and say, if you're not correcting AI, then perhaps you're lacking a certain amount of talent. So what do you feel like that you need to know going in? I mean, it doesn't immediately solve everything for you. You need to have obviously taste. You need to have some creativity. You need to know what, I mean, it's all subjective, right? What sounds good, what doesn't. But what do you feel
Yeah.
like someone coming in needs to know?
I think there's always going to be a place for a reference track. I think it's important because you know what you like, and you in your head, you know what the sound you're trying to achieve. And like, especially with assistive tools, where like kind of getting you to the 90% point, you can still put your reference track beside it and go, okay, actually the bass is a bit lacking. Maybe I need to boost that, or I need to roll off the highs or whatever. And I think that's still important. Yeah, because I think like obviously these things do simplify and extract away a lot of the complicated stuff, but like a lot of the tools do still allow you to kind of like, okay, this one view, which is like, okay, this is the kind of very easy view. You can change the balance, or here's like the more detailed view where, you can actually kind of tweak stuff and get down into it basically. The one thing I learned when I was learning mixing was like the most important thing you can have is a reference track, or multiple reference tracks indeed. You know what I mean?
In your own experience, of course, right? Not just the
Yeah.
track, but just your own experience and, domain expertise is a little too serious of a word here, but you need to have some to use AI, I think, or to use it well.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, there is to a certain extent. I mean, a lot of the tools can be quite good and get you to a very good basic point, but it depends on what you're trying to use it for. If you're like, this is going to be the final touch, and you're not going to like you're not basically intending to promote it as your magnum opus, we'll say, it's fine. But like, if that's a case where this is like, you're going to spend a lot of money on it, you want it to be your biggest shining piece of work of art, I think it helps to have someone there that you can go, okay, I've used AI to create this. Can you just sense check it, basically?
What work does AI have to do to understand, say, not only just different genres, but taste?
Taste is, yeah. I mean, like, it's something I've thought about recently. It was like, I'll give you a perfect example. I was going to a day festival here in London, and I asked in the WhatsApp. I didn't know a lot of the people on the lineup, so I asked, like, guys, what are we going to see today? And someone in the chat had fed the lineup to ChatGPT and goes, "What should we go see?" I was like, I don't know about that. I mean, how does ChatGPT know what I like or the particular sounds? And like, I get that it's probably trained it on, or it's probably read some stuff it read online, but like, ultimately taste is a human thing. And I don't think it can be replaced with AI. However, that's not to say that like, if you're using a piece of software and it has like what's called reinforcement learning, where it's learning what you do like, that's different. You know what I mean? That's but it's essentially you are training it. But I think straight off the bat, asking AI for like music recommendations, things like that, and it can only go so far without knowing truly what you are. I mean, it's the same way that we use like things like Netflix. It figures out, you give the thumbs up, thumbs down. It figures out what kind of TV programs you like. But it's different. It's like you're providing the taste, because ultimately it's a human thing. You know what I mean?
For sure. Everyone loves using the word algorithm, right? My algorithm, whether it be on social media or, YouTube TV or Netflix, but, I always find it to be incredibly overly reactive, right? I was with my son watching some video on the 4th of July. Next thing you know, it was offering nothing but fireworks videos. And
Yeah.
I can only watch so many of those, but
You do get the happy accents. I found an amazing thing the other day. It was like bolero and Latin jazz covers of the original music from Street Fighter 2. It was unbelievable. It was like an hour long of just, I don't know how they made that. Maybe they'd use it or whoever, but like, it sounded amazing. It was one of those things. I'm so glad I got this recommended to me by the algorithm. It does learn.
I mean, there's been a lot of talk about just music discovery, that AI is going to play a really big role in that. I mean, I can certainly tell you just Spotify does not do a very good job recommending music.
No, I don't think I know why.
Yeah, it just doesn't understand. I mean, my mood especially. I mean, so I actually listen to when I'm working. Sometimes I listen to focus music, just
Yeah,
certain whether it be binaural beats or something like that. And then, I mean, sometimes I even have it on, rain sounds or something to sleep. And
I use
then
that as well.
I'm very diverse as far as my musical taste. Again, you mentioned Latin jazz. I listen to a fair amount of that. Lately, I've been doing a lot of Afro-Cuban music, particularly from Puerto Rico.
Love it.
And boy, if it tries putting together what Spotify DJX they call it, I think it starts putting a playlist together, and it'll go from a Latin jazz song, and it'll say, "Yeah, here's what you were listening to last week," and it'll just go boom, and I got some sort of focused meditation music going,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the other thing as well, I guess with Spotify is like it's so heavily influenced by the major labels that they're
Right.
just pushing stuff on you. It's just like, oh God, I don't want to listen to this. I'll never listen to this. Stop telling me to listen to it.
So let's get a little deeper into mixing and mastering and some of the areas that AI can really create some efficiencies. You mentioned discovery of music, but there's also discovery of a sound or your
Yeah.
personality and your taste, right? All subjective human things we talked about. If, say, I were mixing and then mastering a track, how would I work with it to really preserve some of my tastes? And on a discovery standpoint, I think you said happy accidents earlier in different contexts, but that's a good word where something comes up. You say, "Ooh, that sounds great." And some
Yeah.
people might argue, well, you didn't discover that on your own, but that's probably okay. Or it
Yeah.
is okay.
I mean, I guess like reference track mastering is a thing. It's been a thing for a while, I would say. I mean, that can be very helpful in terms of like trying to preserve your style and kind of like preserve the sound you like. It's not really there for mixing yet. I think mixing is just there's just so much going on. I think it's very hard to reverse engineer a mix essentially to like what's going on in there and that you particularly like. But that's not to say that like there are tools that can do corrective mixing for you, and then you can have like you could add creative kind of things on top. It's actually something we're kind of working on that will kind of generate the flavor kind of like imagine like I said, just go back to what we've built already is like the which we have currently is like going for a haircut. It'll give you a short back and sides. It's very clean, it's very presentable. But like what we're working on at the moment is like to give you the option, okay, I want the funky haircut, you know what I mean? I want the kind of the techno haircut essentially, where it'll kind of give you a more like a kind of creative layer on top that you can then tweak. And then the idea is that it would learn over time basically what kind of stuff you like and make representations on that. I don't know if any other mixing tools are doing anything like that at the moment, though, to be
Yeah.
quite honest.
So it can really train on your personal tastes and become highly personalized.
Yeah, that's what we're working on at the moment. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. No, that's real interesting. I mean, that's where it becomes hard to argue that it's not a force multiplier, right?
exactly. Yeah, and the thing is that you know what you like, and you can always reset it and tell it like, okay, I want to just explore now. That's just the thing. So that's the beauty. It leaves you in control no matter what. So you're the tastemaker effectively.
Yeah. I mean, that's always been the way in music, right? You can, short of live performance, you can do another take or do a different mix or, that's part of the process. It's only using just some new tools.
I did see something very exciting recently. I was at the Berkeley AI Music Summit a few weeks ago in Boston, and Stability AI. I don't know if you've come across them there. They have a music model that you can prompt. They were demonstrating. I thought was really interesting. Was where you'll have your existing folder of your samples and what have you sitting on your hard drive, and then you can take your existing base model and train your own model using your own samples to create all these brand new sonic palette like happy accident. It was absolutely fascinating. It didn't take a few hours or whatever to do it, but like then you suddenly got all these kind of really unique sounds like based on what you kind of collected and whatnot. And like I was just like fascinated by some of the stuff that the guys were showing that they've made with it. And I think that's going to be kind of the next assistive kind of evolution where it's using it in a good way because it's not just like generating slop, it's generating samples that then you're going on to arrange and put into a finished track. And it's based on a curated set of samples that you create. I think that's also, it's a whole new way to create sounds effectively.
I've been thinking lately about how, I guess, part of the judgment that comes into it is, does that sound like me? But then there's another layer to it, is that sound like something I would create.
Yeah.
So you don't sound the same as a musician at age 22 as you do 52, right?
Yeah.
So an interesting point is that AI sometimes can create something that it's up to you to decide, does that sound like me? Um, and then does that sound like something I would create?
Yeah, absolutely.
I was having a conversation with an engineer recently who restored the guitar part that was played live. And I was talking to
Oh,
you
wow.
before we started recording. So Steve Morris, he's a legendary rock guitarist. Someone would never think of AI being used. And this was kind of before AI was even AI. They paid a recording team to record a live session, right?
Yeah.
So it's a live concert, a live performance, and they're on a plane. They go to another country right after the gig, only to find out there were a ton of problems in the recordings. There's a lot of money involved. There's responsibilities involved. You can't just throw it out and say, "Oh, that's the way it goes."
Mm,
So, gentleman named Dr. Bill Evans, he's actually on a previous episode. He recreated what Steve played, and he knew so much about his playing style, everything from the way he, picks the strings to what he
wow.
plays. And he's a very improvisational player, and it's a very progressive band. He was playing with Flying Colors at the time, but he recreated some lost sections of a guitar solo that he improvised. And Steve himself, who's considered one of the greatest guitarists in the world, listened to it and he said, "I can't tell where you restored it."
That's insane.
So that goes back to what I was saying is, does that sound like me? If you can't tell where AI was used, then that's good judgment.
Just on a similar story, I was at a talk a few years ago at the Amsterdam Dance event. It was a Dolby Atmos kind of presentation that they'd taken Blue Monday by new order and they'd redone it in Atmos, but they had lost the original tapes, um, as you do, and the engineer was explaining basically how he had gotten back to it, and he was using AI stem separation basically to stem separate the kick, famous kick. And then he was using the original, I think he lifted the stem separated out the sample and he was able to trigger it then basically based on the MIDI so it would sound exactly like it did on the record. And it just sounded amazing in a proper atmosphere, as you can imagine. It was fascinating. Like that was how, he came to recreate it. Really. Takes are gone. That's it. But they made it, they made it back.
Right. Um, if you think about music as art, which it is, lost art is a sensitive conversation, right? I mean, there's missing paintings all over the world, but if we can, I think a lot of people would agree, if you can use some techniques or even technology to restore, say, a certain painting, some people might say it's not as good as the original, or it is, but if you can't tell and you're able to save a piece of art, in this case, music, then I think there's a really strong argument for that.
In most cases, probably best not to tell. you know?
Absolutely. Sometimes the struggle or the long process, the manual process is where the good ideas come from, the creativity versus AI assisting you. I even find myself lately just using AI and realize I'm actually thinking less sometimes, not just in music. So I'm becoming well aware of it, but
Yeah.
it's helping me come up with some great ideas. The struggle of it is where sometimes the real art can happen. Is that true at all once you get into the kind of mixing and mastering standpoint?
I'm not, like I talk to a lot of our users. It's not something. I mean, a lot of them just see mixing and mastering as like something they need to do to get something out or to get it sounding decent enough to share with someone else. So I'm not necessarily very in that respect because a lot of like what we do is very much a corrective mixing thing. It's not doing anything creative. Maybe something we build later on, does something like that. But right now it's not. But like definitely in music creation, obviously it's very easy to prompt stuff and get something, an inspiration. I guess before a lot of it was like you try and constrain yourself, okay, I'm only going to use this synthesizer and that's it. And you just kind of dealt with that pain and you hope that something will kind of come out of it. So it kind of does, yeah, it does make things just so much easier now just to have like the happy accidents are less frequent because and I guess you could argue that it's not as authentic as because it's not really you. Or it's not like, because obviously if you're constraining yourself to one device, would say that's pain in some ways, you know what I mean? You have to really think and bend your mind around the different ways to kind of get different sounds out of it. I guess you kind of obviously you lose that when you're just okay. I need to figure out a good bass line basically. So, but at the end of the day, if you're having fun and that's it, if you're enjoying the process of music, then so what?
Yeah, if you can remove some of the friction or the pain points, or maybe I said it, yeah, I said it earlier, some of that left brain type stuff, so you can be more creative with the right
Exactly.
brain, then that can help a lot. Now, if you have the budget or the money or the means or just the friends, a lot of times, the mixing and mastering can just be handed off. Talk to me about how that's changed. What have the changes been for actual producers and engineers in the entire landscape of where we're at with music tech in 2026?
Yeah, I guess it's never been cheaper than ever. I guess, or to release music. You can get samples generated with AI now. I mean, obviously you can do full songs, but like obviously you can get tracks mixed and mastered for very little money these days. So it's opened up the doors for so many people who don't really have the means, wouldn't have had the means before to get stuff out there. People who are just incredibly talented, but like just don't have $150 basically to mix and master a track, which I think is awesome. And I think that's a lot of the feedback we're getting from our users is that it's just like, I'm so happy this has come along. Finally I can release this stuff to the world. Where normally before we just languish on someone's kind of hard drive forever. Which I think is awesome. But I don't think that really hurts the kind of professional mix engineers either, because I think if something is good enough and you can get the money for it, you're going to spend it on your art anyway, because it deserves that kind of, it's your art, you love it, and you're going to give it all the attention and the best chance it has of succeeding, where before it could never, no one might ever hear it basically, because you just couldn't afford to bring it to the world effectively.
Yeah, I mean, it allows the less talented to get music out there faster, and it allows the talented to get music out there faster, right?
Yeah.
But that's taste. I mean, food's always a common analogy. There's lots of junk food out there and there's lots of quality food. And fortunately, quality food usually costs more. So you, on some level, right? But
Yeah.
quality music doesn't always cost more. And, I wish there was a way to fix that. But, I don't want it to cost more. I don't want it to be unattainable. I don't mean it that way. But yeah, it all gets mixed together. And I think that's what we're going to see sorted out in the coming years, really. And
In
it'll
what
move
sense?
fast.
Like you mean in terms of discoverability and
Yeah,
segmentation,
so
or
there's a bunch of topics around it. We don't have to hit them all, but a lot of people just say AI music, right? There's a big difference in text prompt to generate than using some AI tools that are likely just
yeah.
replacing other previous tech tools. And there's a massive difference in that. And I don't think the general public or just music fans, I'll even narrow it down to, understand that.
Yeah, I think I've said this before. It's just like I think humans ultimately will seek out authenticity, and I mean, like if you go on social media, you see this well. Yeah, I mean, my brain immediately switches off. I think it's the same for music. I mean, obviously, I give you an example. Actually, to be fair, I found it very hard. That Latin jazz thing I mentioned earlier about the Street Fighter thing, like parts of that were definitely AI generated, but like someone definitely took the time to arrange it and like take different parts and put it together into a cohesive thing. And I was really struggling to like figure out if it was AI generated or not. But like, there's no way that like the structure was fake. Definitely, you could hear like the Suno kind of low fineness in it, but that doesn't matter. At least like overall, it was like there's no way someone prompted an hour long. Give me an hour long, Latin jazz version of all the different fighters in Street Fighter. It's just not. It just doesn't. There's no way. So, it's like I found it authentic. You know what I mean? I think people will grab it, but like if it was obviously slop, you're just gonna tune out.
I think people need to put more thought into where AI fits in not only their taste, but fits in the landscape of music and everything nowadays. I mean, the big difference is that, when MIDI came along, people were saying, oh, geez, everyone can own a Steinway. That's not right. Or anyone has an instrument. But the difference with AI is that it's not just music, it's everywhere and everything. Yeah. So tell us a little bit more. Where can people learn about RoEx audio and talk about who is the ideal user of RoEx?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, like our main flagship product is Automix. It's a web platform and it's also a desktop app as well. So They can sit beside your DAW, essentially as a kind of a sidekick or sidecar. Basically you bounce your stems out of your DAW. Say you've done all the creative stuff. You're happy with the arrangements and you applied your nice creative effects. You basically bounce everything out, put it into our product, provide some very high level mix settings like the instrument type. We can figure it out, or the importance of the different tracks in the mix, and then we'll generate a mix for you where we'll figure out the best settings for EQ, compression, gain, panning, and then we'll allow you to tweak that to your liking, and then render it. And then we've also given you the option to export it back into the DAW to use Ableton Live or Bitwig, so you can actually take the mix back, where we've configured all the stock plugins, so you could tweak stuff to your heart's content. So you're back in the DAW, especially that's really aimed at people who are like, there's like if you just like you can use a product, you just have no interest in mixing, you just want to get the sound, maybe you just want to adjust the volume levels. But if like you're a step beyond where you're like, okay, I really want to tweak that bass, we cater to that person as well. So like, I guess prosumers essentially. So we cater kind of to those two things. It's not for professionals, that's for sure. I mean, why would you use something like this if you're a professional? I mean, maybe one day if we're in Pro Tools, there'll be a magic button that will do this corrective mixing for you. But it doesn't do anything creative. I think our whole ethos is that like we want to remove all the barriers to creativity essentially. So allow you to spend more time doing the creative stuff than not doing the legwork when it comes to the mixing side of things.
I think that's really important that we can remove some of those barriers. I mean, I remember just learning to use a DAW, and going from, reading, writing music to learning a DAW was a big speed bump, to be honest with you.
It's still today. I mean, God, if anyone who opens up a DAW today, they still, like, I don't think they've gotten any simpler, to be honest. Maybe some of them have, but like, they're still overwhelming. And there's a lot of baggage as well. I think with a lot of new things that come out. I mean, we purposely got hired a designer to help us with the UI UX. We purposely got someone who's never made music before. Because we knew if we did, they'd bring all the baggage that comes with a DAW. So they're able to generate a very simple UI that they're very good at UI UX. They understand how to make nice, clean design. And then we were able to guide him, obviously, there's certain things you do need to have, like a playhead and things like that, obviously. And that's worked out really well for us. You just keep it simple and don't intimidate people, because that's what we all remember when we first opened the DAW.
Yeah, making it more accessible and easier. I've heard a lot of music tech companies talk about bringing in people who are not musicians, again, who don't have the baggage or the history of what some of the products look like before. And UI UX, I think, is an area where that can really have a big impact.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, David, where can people find RoEx Audio?
Yeah, our main website is www.roexaudio.com. And then through there, you have links to Automix, which is what I just described a while ago, our mixing and mastering platform. And then we also have a free tool for musicians called Mix Check Studio. It allows you to upload a mix or master track, tell us what genre it is, and then we'll analyze it for free, tell you what's wrong with it, more kind of about if there's issues with like the tone profile, loudness, clipping, very kind of fundamental things that can be fixed with corrective processing, and how to go back and fix it in the DAW if you want to, and what it means for your music if you don't when you put it out on streaming. Just super helpful. And then there's a mastering credit as well if you want to use it, but you don't have to. Yeah, roexaudio.com.
Great. Well, I'll check it out. All right. So I think this is one of the first AI music conversations where we've talked about sitar, Latin jazz, and monumental rock 80s guitarist. So let's wrap it up there. And everyone check out roexaudio.com and RealMusic.ai. David, thank you so much. Great conversation.
Thank you. Loved it.
All right. Bye, everyone.